Hi everybody there on YouTube. We'll be starting the talk now shortly. I'm going to pass the mic over to Hugh, and I think Niall's going to do a few words as well.
Yeah, we just got them this year, yeah. Yeah, they're a nice quality jacket. That's the new logo there as well. It's a fella from, I'd say, County Donegal, who does a lot of school work.
Is it coming back?
Where did he go?
He went out the back.
He's supposed to get the introduction. Non-stop.
I'll go and get him.
Disappeared out the back.
I'm going to push this in. We can keep it.
The old fellow still lives around town. Neil.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen him. I didn't see him. Perhaps I did. I ended up having a drink. We were going to go down to the forge and went down. It was closed, so then somewhere in town. That wasn't my last time. It was time before that.
He's coming.
Still got Christmas.
Sorry.
Still working.
Hi everybody, anybody who's just joined the stream, don't forget to hit the like button and share the stream. I'm going to pass you over now to Niall.
Hello, Niall McCahan. First of all, in case any of you don't know me, I'm the manager here at the Donegal Railway Museum. First of all, delighted to have you here at our award-winning museum, I have to say too, and I'm particularly delighted to have Hugh with us today. As you know, Hugh has been had a number of books in relation to the railways and buses, and it's great now to have a new book about the Swilly too. And I have to say, we're absolutely delighted. It's a great book, and I know, Hugh, there's been a lot of research into it too. One of the things I just want to say to you too, before we talk about Hugh, is that for Heritage Week, we've just had confirmation that Joe Begley is going to speak, who's a very well-known railway historian. It's great to hear. And also Charles Friel as part of our Heritage Week events, so keep an eye out for those. Also, I said the book has actually went down a storm, I have to say, since Hugh, we got it. We were able to get our hands on advanced copies, and I have to say, I've had to order and reorder, which is great to see. And also our calendar is just out too, so there's a wee plug for that. But again, thank you for joining us. I'm delighted also here to Anthony McFarlane, whose family, of course, built the railways, whatever, in the Swilly. You'll hear a lot more about that there from Hugh. It's great to see, and a great turnout today of people anyway. So I'm going to hand across now to Hugh. So Hugh, thank you again.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you. If you wait till I put my microphone on, we'll be ready to go, I suppose. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be here. Can you all hear me up the back? Excellent. I want to talk to you today about this wee book that I've written about the Swilly. And you're saying to yourself, why has he written one about the Swilly when we're sitting in a County Donegal carriage? Well, the answer is quite simple. I did a wee book last year on the CDR. And given that that's the bottom half of Donegal, we had to cover the top two. Now, on here is the diamond logo of the Lough Swilly Railway. It doesn't say Londonderry and Lough Swilly Railway, but the original title of the company, of course, was the Londonderry and Lough Swilly Railway. It was the oldest railway company in existence in Europe when it went out of business in 2014. And its job, first of all, was to build a line to Farland Point in Lough Swilly, extend to Buncrana, and after that, the Letterkenny Railway was built, and it opened in 1883 from Tubin Junction, and onto those lines we had the Buttonport line built in 1903, and the Donegal line in 1901. So he had this amazing real system of 3-foot gauge track. And so we know where we are. We will be here in a minute, I can tell you. It's decided not to change. Oh no, it's because we have a technical difficulty, which I lost. Here we are. Hit that one there. Fine. Yeah, fine. Here's a map of the bus system as it was. And interestingly, when the Lough Swilly converted to buses and lorries, a process that took really from 1935 when Donegal was closed, right 1940 when they closed to Gweedore, and later 1947, leaving the original routes left, and they went 1953. They used this map, which I was given. In fact, Mr. White, the manager, was a wee boy. And I looked at this map, and if you look at it, you can see the railway track on it as well. They simply put the bus routes over it. So the routes of the Lough, notice it says railway. The railway was very, very proud of its railway heritage. It wasn't just a bus company. It was something much more. And as a wee boy, I used to go to holiday every year, holidays, to Glenties, just down here, which of course was in County Donegal Railways territory. But my father bought a car in 1960, and we started to take trips up the Rosses. And I was going through the Rosses, and I looked out the window, and I could see, amazingly, bits of an old railway. There were gate posts, there was a station at Gweedore, I saw the station at Buttonport, and I kept seeing these grey and green buses that said LNLSR Railway. So I had to find out more. Very hard to find out in those days, really. No internet, very little. And in 1964, this book came out, written by a gentleman called Edward Patterson, and it was the first history of the Lough Swilly Railway. And I got a copy of this for my birthday when I was 13. And I read it and I read it. And every time I came back to Donegal, I thought, oh, that makes sense. So I became very, very interested. And I got my hands on something even more interesting, which was a Lough Swilly bus timetable. And here's the wee Lough Swilly bus going through the hills of Donegal. And the timetable was fascinating because it had all the old railway routes in it. And the really interesting thing was it took 4 hours by train from Derry all the way to Buttonport, and the bus was still taking 4 hours. Where was that?
You could have been in America.
Well, absolutely, you know. It was a bit like Ryanair, you know. What should we say here? And basically, I started finding out about the routes, and I wanted to know more. I wanted to know much more. I knew all the County Donegal people. I knew the buses down this end of the county, but this was a bit of a challenge. And what you have to realise in the 60s was distances were greater. Do you remember that? If you're a wee bit more mature like myself, distances were greater. It took longer to get where. And Donegal was a much poorer place. The roads were very bad out the Rosses. The roads, you don't have all the bungalows. A lot of people didn't have running water. You saw people going to the well. Another world, really. And I was quite fascinated. So we hope we hit the right button this time. And here's a kind of typical Lough Swilly bus scene. This is Donegal in 1981. The bus is heading down to Derry, and these two local gentlemen are having a good look at me taking a bit. What do you think he's taking a picture of a bus for? An everyday scene of 1981, and there's the Lough Swilly logo. And this is what you saw all around the county on those routes. Very, very good service. And when I went to Letterkenny first, about 1964, I discovered in the yard at Letterkenny Station, which is now, of course, the bus station at Letterkenny, I discovered this engine. Now, I was confused because it was painted green all over like a Lough Swilly engine. But when I looked up my book, I discovered, of course, it was a County Donegal Railways 464 tank, which had lifted the track on the Letterkenny line. What had happened was, as we all know, Dr. Cox, an American dentist, bought lots of the old Donegal engines, including Drumbo out there. And he bought this one. I wanted to take it to America to set up a tourist railway. And of course, that fell through. And it lay there. And it was getting pretty rusty. So the Lough Swilly guys in their workshop came out with a green paint, and they painted it green. And it lay there till 1969, when it was scrapped without any authority. And it's said, if you go into the bus station now, bits of it are still lying under the tarmac there. What a shame. But the really interesting thing about Letterkenny station is that the County Donegal station and the Lough Swilly station still sat side by side. The Lough Swilly station is under the shopping centre. And it was an amazing thing to go there. The atmosphere of the railways hung about it in the 1960s. You could really feel the atmosphere, and you always felt that Letterkenny was a bit of an operating frontier, that somewhere beyond there lay the Rosses and Dunfanaghy and even Creaslough and all sorts of places. And it was a bit of an adventure to go there. So here's a typical Lough Swilly Railway bus of the 60s. This was at Letterkenny station, and I took this when I was about 14. In those days, you had to get a spool, and you had to borrow your big sister's Brownie 127 camera. You had to save up, and then you took your pictures when you got back home after the holidays to the chemist, and he developed them for you, and they came back, and you thought, funny holiday pictures these, a whole lot of buses, you know. But if you look here, this is classic. These are kids going to the Gaeltacht, and you'd have 10 or 12 Lough Swilly buses going all the way out to Ranafast and Falcara and so on, so the kids could learn to speak Irish by immersion, basically. And on the top, the roof rack, are all their bikes and all their luggage. And Lough Swilly Railway conductors and drivers love nothing better than climbing up there and putting all that luggage up there. What a job. And that is your classic Lough Swilly buses, I think, of those days. And those days, the Lough Swilly was doing very well for itself, in fact. And if you look up some of the cuttings of the time, this is from the Donegal Democrat in 1960. Swilly Company had record year. They actually made more money that year than ever before. Few cars in Donegal, big tourist trade beginning to start. And every year, of course, the invasion of the Scotches. The Scotches would all come on the Derry boat, or the Scotch boat if you're in Derry. They'd come across, and practically the whole Lough Swilly fleet would be there to take them up. And that's why the Lough Swilly was a multilingual company, because you would be speaking Irish out in the Gaeltachts, you would be speaking Ulster Scots round about Manor and Newton, you would be speaking Derry, people talking about Swally and Derry, and then all these Glaswegians turned up, can I have a return to Crana, pal? And the poor conductor had to translate that into English and give them the fare. And interestingly, this guy's doing something interesting too. He's reading a newspaper in public. You don't see people reading newspapers anymore, do you? And he's eating his chalk ice, the good old chalk ice, HB there. But that's classic. That's as I remember it as a wee boy. The Lough Swilly doing well in the 60s, looking the part, going places and making money for the company. And I need to tell you this in this very place. I don't know if it's safe to do so. Donegal Transport Proposal 1959, suggestion that Lough Swilly take over the CDR. Now, how about that? Nobody knew when the CDR was closing who was going to run the buses down here. And the story was, well, let's get the Lough Swilly in because they're good at it. Over and above that, there had been constant suggestions way back in the 20s that the CDR should take over the Lough Swilly. And it never happened, of course. And strangely, the Lough Swilly outlived the CDR at the end of the day. Here we go to the worst disaster to befall the Lough Swilly Railway, the Owen-Carrow Railway accident. 1925, January night, the train has left Kilmacrennan and it's heading over the viaduct to Creaslough and on to Burtonport. And just as they go almost off, they go over this end of the viaduct, the wind reaches 127 miles per hour, the train comes off, 4 people fall out and are killed. Now, when I was a wee boy, we stopped one night at Gweedore Station and a gentleman called Anthony Dillap came to the door, and it turned out he was the former station master who was then the area controller for all the Swilly buses and lorries in the west area of Donegal. And he told me all about the railway. Fascinating. I was 14, really interested. He had marvellous stories about the Civil War, War of Independence, the whole thing. And he said, if you're ever in Letterkenny, go and look for Johnny Hannigan, because Johnny Hannigan was the fireman on the train. He said he still works for the company, he works on lorry maintenance, and he'd be really interested to talk to you. So I put this at the back of my head, and I thought to myself, I really must do that. So, by the way, before we go on, this would be the centenary next year. And as you probably know, if you go up to the end of the viaduct, you can actually see the memorial that local people have put up to it. It lived very long in the minds of people. And there was a worry that more trains could have been blown off. So to ensure they didn't, they actually weighted down all the coaches with concrete blocks and put a wind gauge at Dunfanaghy Road station. And if the wind became too high, they stopped the traffic. But if you've been to the Owencarroll, it goes across what is a continuation of the Great Glen. And it's still a bleak and atmospheric spot today. There's the whole run of the viaduct. And there's where the train came off. So you can imagine this tremendous gale coming down. And when I saw it first as a wee boy, I thought it was a wild and romantic place. And I think I still do. It's really worth seeing if you haven't been to see it. It's one of the major railway relics of Donegal. And a councillor last year said, we need to get some sort of rope ladder system so people could cross it again. And that was mooted for a while. Yeah. So it hasn't happened, but when it was being built, the line, they had terrible trouble getting the piers that hold the viaduct up to actually remain stable. And they finally sunk these. That's why these are different, and they've remained there till today. So that's the Owencarroll. However, fast forward to Letterkenny Station, and there it was in 1967. The engine shed was still there. The water tower was still there, because I had come there at the age of 16 on the CDR bus from Glenties and the CDR bus from Stranorlar up to Letterkenny, because I decided I would track down Johnny Hannigan, the fireman. So I'm 16, I'm a bit unsure of myself, and I thought, you know, I've spent all my pocket money coming up here in this bus all the way from Glenties. My God, you know, will I ever see home again? My parents are go mad if I don't come back. And will this guy speak to me? So I went, got off the bus. So the guy called Michael Gallen drove the CDR bus. Some of you might remember him. And Michael said, oh, just go down to the Swilly station and ask for your man. So I did. And whenever I got there, I was sent down here, and round the back, there was a gentleman standing, fixing a lorry trailer. And I said, are you Mr. Hannigan? You wouldn't use his first name in those. You remember when adults didn't have first names? Well, I said, yeah. And straight away he said, are you here to talk about the Owencarroll? And he put down his tools, he lit his sweet afternoon cigarette, and they blew it all over me. And he started to talk about that fateful night. He'd rescued people. He'd then raised the alarm by walking all the way from the end of the train, the Owencarroll, 2 miles through the storm to Creaslough Station, where he informed the station master. And this whole rescue operation kicked in. He remembered it as if it was yesterday. And what a privilege it was, looking back now, to speak to somebody who was an eyewitness to that. You know, it's like me talking to somebody now who eyewitnessed something 40 years ago. As a journalist, I have interviewed all sorts of people, but I reckon that was probably my actual first interview, and I'm scribbling it all down. And I didn't ask to take a picture of him, because I thought if I asked, maybe he wouldn't do that. However, he told me lots about the Buttonport line, about the time they were running from Buttonport to Doonwell to Kilmacrennan with a pilgrimage train, and it broke down the way by it round about Cashel and Lagore in the middle of nowhere. So they finally raised steam, and they got people back the next morning to Buttonport, as he said, just in time for Mass. And they weren't too pleased, but it had taken them 12 hours. And it was a wild railway. It was a fascinating railway, but it had a very positive impact on the whole Rosses. People could travel to shops in Letterkenny. More goods came through. And probably one of the best stories is that if you didn't like the priest in your local parish, and the way the penances he gave you in confession, well, you could take the train up to the next station and go there instead. And, you know, there's lots of stories of it. There's wonderful history from the days of Civil War. And one of the very first actions in the War of Independence was at Kincashler Road, where 2 local lads were rescued from the British Army, and you can still see the stone to that. So here's Johnny Hannigan speaking to me, and I'm getting in touch with the past. Letterkenny station at that time was pretty well intact. There's the house, there's the booking hall, and it was a dead ringer from the layout to Glenties and the Donegal Railway, to Carndonna and the Northern Line, and there's some old carriages. So you had the ghost, if you like, of the railway hanging about in those days. You didn't have to go far to get in touch with it, and the two came together. This is one of the Swilly's classic buses. They bought them new in 1953. They put them the cover, and they ran right up to 1980, some of them. They ran hundreds of thousands of miles, and sadly nobody managed to keep one, but we'll come on to that later. So that was Letterkenny, and that's where I met Johnny, and it was an absolutely fascinating thing to do, and that's him in his latter years. He lived well on to his 80s, and he remembered that night in the Owen Carroll. The really interesting thing about the Owen Carroll is that news of it were all over the world press the day after. And the morning after, a press photographer turned up, this is 1924, photographed the thing and had it out on the wire all over the world. It was the worst publicity the Lough Swilly ever had. But isn't it amazing? We think we're very clever about putting out pictures and news. They could do it as quickly 100 years ago. So that's Johnny. Sadly died. He has relatives living still around Letterkenny, and really quite fascinating to talk to him. Now, the Lough Swilly did very well in the 60s, but by the 1970s, things are changing. Basically, people are getting cars in Donegal. People are becoming more mobile. People are using the Lough Swilly buses less. And there is a problem. Basically, the company starts making a loss year on year. And the management went to the southern government, it went to northern government, and the problem is that it straddled the border. The headquarters at Pennyburn, Derry, all the running is mostly done in Donegal. And there's the problem. Neither side wants to be the first to offer the money. Different world politically from today. However, they do, and they give them aid in kind, and they produce these buses, which were run by CIE. There's one CIE livery there. And this is at Letterkenny Station in 1974. It was really busy. And it looks as if everything's doing well, but behind the scenes, the Swilly is in trouble. And it wasn't the first time it was in trouble, because it nearly went bankrupt in 1927. The Swilly was very badly affected by partition. The border comes along and it cuts off Derry, its natural supply point to Donegal. So a lot of the goods don't come through Derry to Donegal anymore. They come up via Letterkenny and on from Dublin and so on. However, I need to tell you this wee story. The Swilly survived during the Troubles. And I need to talk about this in a very non-sectarian and non-partisan way, but it was real life for the Swilly during the Troubles. And when I was, it's exactly 50 years ago, 1974, there were two things going on in my life. I was engaged to this lady here at the front. We since got married, it's okay. I haven't been engaged for 50 years, got married. And I was staying down in Lough with my parents, and I wanted to phone her. Now, 50 years ago, you wouldn't believe this, never mind mobile phones, there were no dial phones in Donegal. And I was fed up phoning through Lough post office, and the wife that ran the post office said, "Oh, here you're trying to speak to the bird today, you know." So I thought, I've got a great idea. I'll go up to Derry, and they've got British phones there, and I can stick 10 pence, I can speak to her. That'd be great. And in the meantime, I can go and visit the Holy of Holies, the shrine of the Lough Swilly headquarters at Pennyburn in Derry, where they had been since 1863. So took the CDR, or should say the CIE bus by this time, up to Letterkenny, changed buses, and jumped on the bus from Letterkenny, Lough Swilly bus, double-decker, Letterkenny to Derry. Now, that, 50 years ago, is the main road from Derry to Letterkenny. It's unrecognisable. So I'm sitting upstairs, we pass out a leopard conductor heading for Dunlow. Still had conductors at that point, and I head for Derry. We go through the Lagan here. I look over to see the Doherty Castle at Burt, and we come eventually to the border. And this is where the story gets very interesting. because we came to one of these things, which was a checkpoint. You were either side of Derry, and it was just all traffic coming from the Republic was examined, not just by the customs, but by the British Army. So here I am, 23, a name like Hugh Docherty, a face like mine, as we say in Glasgow, on a Lough Swilly bus coming from the Republic, and we got to Clay, and we're all pulled off the bus. We're all lined up, either at the side of it, legs kicked apart, and the Scottish sergeant comes to me and, of course, says, ID. So I bring out my ID, and he says, oh, a Glasgow address, a Donegal name, a Donegal face. What the hell are you doing here? There's a problem, because I'm called Hugh Docherty, Dougherty. A well-known IRA man of the time was called Hugh Doherty. And people kept confusing me with him with me. But the worst thing is that he actually came from Glasgow and grew up probably about half an hour away from me. So there was a lot of radio traffic, and we all had to stand there for about 15 minutes. And there was a wee man from Gweedore on that bus and a suitcase. And the sergeant said to him, where are you going, pal? And he said, I'm going to Glasgow. I'm getting the train in Derry to get the train to Belfast, to get up to Belfast, to get to Larne, to get the ferry at Larne. They give them the whole thing, and the train up to Glasgow. So what did the army sergeant do? He knew the train was at 3:15. He held the bus long enough so he'd miss his connection from Derry. Really nasty. Anyway, they were nastier still, because once they let us on, there was a wee student conductor who was on for the summer. When I was at university in Glasgow, I was a student bus conductor, so I'd been talking to this lad. We had a good talk, and he said, wait to see what happens at the border. This happens every day. They'd taken his way bill. The way bill is the official document a conductor kept of all his ticket sales and everything else, had to have it. And the sergeant took it, ripped it up, threw it into the bushes, and said, you can go now. About 5 minutes down the road, the wee guy lifts the back seat and there's another spare way bill, all filled up already, because it happened every day. Anyway, Docherty goes on into the Maiden City, and I meet Mr. Hamilton, the manager, because I'd written to him, and this is important, to say that I wanted to come talk to him. I'd used the story in a trade magazine called Buses, and he gave me a lovely set of old Lough Swilly tickets. There you are. Probably worth a fortune nowadays, but Lough Swilly bus tickets. And we talked about it, and he told me quite clearly that the company was in trouble, because Pennyburn Yard has a whole lot of buses in it, and this is August. And he said 10 years ago they'd all been out in service, taking people to Buncrana, all the rest of it. And he said, we're going to have to make conductors redundant. We're going to have to get more help in. And he was really quite down about it, but very, very helpful to me. Anyway, I took lots of pictures. And what you need to know is that in Pennyburn, they maintained the buses in the original engine sheds of 1863, and the track was still down in them. It was fabulous. So I'm busy taking pictures. By this time, I've graduated to a wee Instamatic that I saved up for. I'm 23, I've got a lot of money, I'm getting married the next year. So I've got this camera, and finished the job. And here's the letter he wrote me. I'll just read it to you. Dear sir, thank you for your letter of 11th July. You may visit at your own risk this company's premises at Pennyburn, Monday to Friday between 9 AM and 5 PM, and you may take this letter as your authority. Look at the letterhead, Londonderry Lough Swilly Railway, it's all there. So what happened? I was going back down to get the CIE Express bus back down to Donegal town, and I said to them in the office, that's me away. Mr. Hamilton said, oh, there's a bus going down to the bus station in Derry to go in service. It's going to Ramelton. Jimmy, the driver here, jump on beside him. He'll take you down, give you a lift. So all down the Strand Road. We're halfway down the Strand Road when there's a strange noise, and a British Army pig armoured car screeches up right in front of the bus. I nearly go through the windscreen. They shoot onto the bus, 3 soldiers. They rip me off. And the guy says, why have you been taking pictures of our headquarters? Because I hadn't noticed that the British Army headquarters was over the road, Strand Road. So they were going to take away my camera. They asked for my ID. There was a lot of radio traffic. And then I produced the letter. And they said, well, that's fine then. And they let me go. So I didn't end up in the cash or anything. But if I handed the letter, but there's 2 things about this. If you sit and think about this, 1974 in Derry, it's 2 years after Bloody Sunday, there'd been the Ulster Workers' Strike. It was a horrible, horrible time. I wouldn't exaggerate it in any way. And I suppose there was an element of excitement with a young guy going to see all this. But having said that, I write a letter from an address in Donegal, can I come and see your headquarters? And they write straight by and say, aye, fine, come on. So how good was the security? You know, it's even when you actually examine that in the light of things that have happened today. Anyway, that is the letter that kept me out of jail. And I might not have been here today. And I might not have married my good lady wife. I might still be in the maze or someplace. I've just forgotten about it, you know. So thank you, Lough Swilly Railway. So that's the Troubles. The Troubles did have an effect on the Lough Swilly. A lot of the passenger traffic coming in to Derry for shopping just didn't happen. And it was in trouble. A lot of tourists didn't happen. And another thing that really affected the company badly was that in May 1967, Glasgow Celtic won the European Cup. Now you're saying to yourself, why is that important? Well, every year at the Glasgow Fair, thousands of Glaswegians came to Derry Boat, and as I said earlier, they got the Lough Swilly bus all over Donegal. And then a whole lot of them went to see Celtic play in Lisbon, and they discovered sunshine, and they discovered jet travel, and they never bothered coming back to Donegal. And that traffic disappeared over the next few years. So there's a good wee example of the Troubles. Now, let me take you on to something much happier. Cashel na Gor station, the highest and most remote Lough Swilly station. There's Errigal, and it was between Falcara in this direction and Gidor in that direction. And in 2019, my good lady wife and I got 3 nights in there on the basis of writing a travel article about it. It was wonderful. And we got there, and the atmosphere was terrific. The people who own it have restored it. They've put back the name. They were hoping at that time even to lay a bit of track, but the atmosphere was superb. And from that platform went thousands of emigrants from Donegal. When you look at it, it was a sad place to some extent. We knew a lad back in Glasgow, Paddy Rorty, who wore his gold Fáinne, and very proud of his roots. He remembered getting on this station in 1937 to get the boat to Glasgow, along with about 300 people, and all the relatives waving goodbye. And the point about the Buttonport extension line is it was opened to stimulate the fishing industry in Buttonport. But sadly, a whole lot of local people saw it, jumped on it, and never came back. And that wasn't necessarily the intention of Balfour, the Secretary of State for Ireland, who had it built. But we stayed there. And the very first day we were there, it was June, Donegal weather. There was a blizzard, more or less. It was pouring. The windows were rattling. And you really got the atmosphere of what it must have been like away up there. But we have eyewitness accounts that a whole lot of people came every night to see the train coming. Young people had a dance. They played cards. It was a kind of social place. And then, of course, the railway closes and it's left high and dry, but quite magnificent. And a train arrived in 2019 at Cashel na Gor. There it is. I brought along one of my models of my Lough Swilly Railway 460 Letterkenny Buttonport extension wagon, the brake van, and I put it in the platform, photographed it. So there's the first train there since the track was lifted 1947. So there you are. Yes, I'm afraid I do have models of the Lough Swilly Railway that I've built, and they're in Glasgow. Very, very worrying. Now, if you walked up the track from Cashel na Gor, you can now access this piece of track, and you can see that, look at the quality of the workmanship and the bridges built in 1903. What an asset has been thrown away, except nowadays, at least it's been used for leisure. But the quality of the engineering, the Buttonport line, is astonishing. It really is worth seeing. And you can imagine people labouring to build this, the guys that built it. The contractor was nearly made bankrupt by the whole job. It was really difficult. So that's worth saying. And what's good about this is there's an awareness of the heritage of the Lough Swilly and the County Donegal that is just growing at the moment. And this is a great thing to see. We haven't forgotten it. You can actually buy a keyring at the Buttonport Centre. Here is one of the engines heading for Buttonport to Derry. Here's the station. And they've actually got a model of the whole station there as well. So a growing interest. And that's why in the book it's called Seeking the Swilly. And what I'm saying is really, if you seek the Swilly, you find an awful lot of it today. Now, the Lough Swilly was very much about excursions, either by boat, by train, or at one time by boat, or by bus. And when we talk about the Lough Swilly, everybody talks about the Buttonport line, the Royces, as I've done. But the part of Donegal that was real home to the Swilly by bus and rail was Inishowen, which of course is the ancestral home of the Doherty clan, I need to tell you. And here is Ballyliffin Station in early 1920s. And this is a Sunday excursion waiting to go home to Derry. The platform is absolutely thronged. This is one of the giant engines that were built for heavy haulage to Buttonport. And by the way, if you look carefully, you'll see it in the book, everybody has been in Poland Bay for a day down at the beach. And they're all dressed up in the most formal of clothes because people did dress formally. And Ballyliffin's an interesting case. The railway came in 1901 and a hotel appeared. And then people started going and guest houses appeared. It really did stimulate the local economy. It made it accessible to Derry as a day trip. And the Derry Journal of 1901 describes it as, this town will develop as the Blackpool of Donegal. Now, thank God it didn't, because we're going up there for 3 days next week. And you just imagine roller coasters. But it did stimulate the economy. And this is, I think, what we forget. People look at the line up to Cairn, and they say to themselves, it only lasted 34 years. And of course, it was killed by road competition. And the Lough Swilly Railway, to some extent, was killed by road competition. But of course, what it did was it bought up all those competing road services and turned them into its own. But if you go to Ballyliffin today, because wherever you look, you will find lots of the Swilly. And look at the quality of the brickwork there. The amazing thing is, if you looked at that last picture, there's not a tree or bush in sight. Today, the whole place is covered in greenery, not because it's not maintained, but because there's been a massive growth in greenery all over Donegal in the last 50 years. Why it is, I don't know, but these are worth seeing. They're all over the place when you start looking for them. They're private homes, but the quality of that building, and you can imagine in your mind's eye all those hundreds of people on those trains who must have enjoyed it, wearing their best clothes, of course. This is the very spot in Ballyliffin, taken in 2010, shortly before the Swilly disappeared. This is the very spot where the railway crossed the road, and there's continuity. All those years later, a Lough Swilly bus heading for Carndonna is still running on the same route. And that's the amazing thing when you look at it. The timetable between Buncrana and Carndonna was exactly the same, right up to the closure as the railway was in 1935 when it closed. Now, you might think that's not good, but in fact, they knew the patterns very well and they stuck to them. So there's the Swilly still going at that point. And there's a classic Lough Swilly view. They got a lot of second-hand buses. These came from Ulster Bus, from CIE. But the Swilly had marvellous mechanics. They could keep these buses going for about 20 years in some cases and running well and really getting their money's worth out of them. And it was very much part and parcel of the everyday scene of Donegal. And when it finally went bankrupt in 2010, it is said for an unpaid tax bill of £30,000. Then, in fact, the place became poorer. It lost part of its character, Donegal, just as it did when the CDR went. So if you take a look at the last days, this was the last Lough Swilly bus I ever photographed in service. This is 2000, the year it went off, 2014, not 10. The buses in the last Lough Swilly fleet, the whole company changed hands. 1981, an namesake, JP Doherty, the kind of businessman, property magnate, bought the company. And by the time the end came, the buses had never looked better. It was really beautiful, well-kept fleet at the end up. But it went bankrupt. It was put out of business. And I remember doing an article about a year before it went, speaking to David Farn, the inspector at Letterkenny. And he said to me something quite interesting. He said, Transport for Ireland specifically stopped us bidding for the local link contracts. You know, the wee local, the green white local link buses, which have changed transport in Donegal. And if Swilly had been allowed to bid for them, I'm quite sure it would have been there still today. But the government had decided, no, it was a bit of an embarrassment. Let's get rid of it. So there's the sort of places it went to. Letterkenny, Dunlow and Fanad, romantic destinations, which you saw in Derry bus station. And of course, that was all gone. And the really interesting thing, and I'm not having a go at the private operators in Donegal at all, there's excellent companies like Feda O'Donnell, McGinley's coaches, Doherty's coaches. But what you don't have in Donegal is any operation by Bus Air north of Letterkenny. It's unique in Ireland, this, but you can't. But Bus Air advertise a route map that shows them going to Marlin Head with your Atlantic Way ticket. It doesn't work. It's very interesting as to why that's happened, why Donegal hasn't come into it, because what the Lough Swilly did as a serious railway and bus operation connected Donegal very well indeed. Whereas now you can't through book to Dunlow, you can't do all the things you could do. And you really do wonder, have we actually made a lot of progress? Now, if you go to the site of Tubin Junction, you will find this superb sculpture. This is Tubin Junction, is where the track split just after Bridge End. The Letterkenny line went right, and the Buncrana line went left. The Buncrana line went right, and it kind of disappeared. It was a customs post. It was an important junction, and after the railway shut in 1953, the bushes kind of took over. And now we've got the Buncrana sculptor who had this made. It's called the Ghosts of Tubin Junction, and it's put the old spot in the map. And it's a good example of people recalling the Lough Swilly and County Donegal heritage. And you would never have seen that 15, 20 years ago. It had signals pointing in both directions. They had this made as well, trespassing notice. And that is, you can see it from Bridge End, and you can get to it from the Inch wildlife place as well. Now, you're saying, what else is left of the Lough Swilly? I can tell you, there's actually one last operating piece of Lough Swilly rolling stock in the shape of this bus, which lives in Salford outside Manchester. It was bought by a pile of enthusiasts before the Lough Swilly closed, and a guy called Tommy Mitchell, who's a Belfast man, bought it and fully restored it. And Tommy takes it out to rallies round the northwest. And he tells me that people come up to him and say, Lough Swilly bus, you took me to school in that, you took me, and he gets all these memories from expats who are living there. So the Swilly lives on in Manchester. And, well, there you are. And he's got the proper lettering up the back. And he tells me, though, that he was driving through Manchester one day and a woman put her hand out to stop him and presumably wanted to go to Buncrana, but couldn't. So that's what we've got left of Swilly. And I just want to put on one last wee picture to you. It's often said that the Lough Swilly and the County Donegal were great rivals and nearly enemies. You've all heard that. This proves it's not true. Londonderry Lough Swilly Railway free pass, available during the years 1964, 65, 66, over all omnibus routes, issued to B.L. Curran, manager of the County Donegal Railways. So they did speak to one another, very much so. And Mr. White, who signed it, of the Lough Swilly, had a free pass in the CDR as well. So that's what I want to do, is just give you a wee flavour of the thoughts behind the book, tell you a wee bit about why I wrote it, how I wrote it, and to this day, I'm still fascinated by the Lough Swilly Railway, and I think there's more to find out about it. Even going through old newspapers, lots of stuff comes to light, and who knows what more I will find out to tell you about another time. Thank you very much.
So, you still say we're going to take any questions?
Yes, if there's any questions, I'm happy to take any questions. If you're still alive.
Ask them either to you or to Anthony, since we've got two experts here.
I heard a story. We did a guided tour from Melton.
Oh, yeah.
And they said that the railway was offered to Melton and they turned it down.
There were lines which were suggested. There was one going to go right up through Fanad. But if you go to Melton at the pier, you see L and LSR and the date on a brick there, because that was the Swilly's pier, and they had a steamboat service from Fawn across. But the railway was never built to Melton.
But the story that the guy told us,
yeah,
was that the city fathers or the town fathers or something said that they had the port, they didn't need a railway,
yeah,
and they turned it down.
Yeah, that was part of it. That's right, because part of it. Yeah, that's.
Melton then used to be county council, head of the county council.
Yes, of course, yes.
And then it moved to Lifford
To
because
Lifford.
it became such a backbone.
That's
So it's just very interesting how the history of the railways affected the economic development of the county.
absolutely, yes, absolutely, you're right, yeah, yeah.
It was, I think it was determined by the Board of Works, wasn't it? Because they were the financiers. In
That's
the
right.
Board of Works in London.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
any money to invest in the railway had to come from the Board of Works,
That's right.
and so they chose, which is why they chose the route of avoiding Dunfanny, because it was saving money as they went off into on the Burtonport extension.
yeah.
They headed off into the wilderness beside Muckish.
Behind the town.
So they didn't get to Dunfanny. And actually, my great grandfather, he offered them, I think it was 10,000 pounds, I suppose, in those days, to extend when they were designing the layout, to extend the railway through Dunfanny, and they turned him down.
Which was crazy,
Which was crazy.
Yeah,
because it would have gone.
yeah, we'd have gone.
Would have been.
So,
But they weren't interested in passenger traffic. They were more
No,
interested
it was
because it was the fishing.
the fishing, that's
from
right.
Burtonport.
Yeah, it's the same Fulcara. Fulcara station's up at the Fiddler's Bridge. It's 4 miles out of the village.
that's right.
Or Dunlow Road was 6 miles out of Dunlow. You know,
Something similar happened in Ballyshannon.
Yeah.
The shipping trade from Ballyshannon didn't survive the arrival of the railways.
Yeah.
And again, there would have been fishing involved there because Erne, the River Erne,
the end, yeah,
was supposed to be the best salmon fishery in Europe, not just in Ireland.
yeah, yeah. And that's before,
There's Bay hangs another tale.
Yeah.
What was done when the ESP came to town,
of course,
killed off the best salmon
the best
fishery
son.
in Europe, and they did the same to various other, like the Shannon system, and wouldn't be told. The people in charge of the Marine Institute in Galway, Dr. West, offered on many occasions to come and at no cost to the ESP to replace the pass that they put in at the generation station with a proper one that the salmon could get up.
Oh, yes, a salmon
And-
lift, yeah.
Yeah, and it was refused.
Aye.
And I mean, they even killed off the eagles there a couple of years back because there were 2 traps and nobody managed over these around it. The Saragossa eel that's in a dangerous species and they were well on their way to getting them back up and running. And the doctor at charge there, it says he's still writing reports about that to this day because there was a blackout on the news about it, but the BBC leaked it. And that's the only way we found out about it.
Oh, there you are. Yeah.
Yeah, cover up,
Yeah.
giant cover up. So that's what went on. And everybody looking at his own business and not the bigger picture or the good of mankind.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, right. Yeah.
I was going to ask, I know, Anthony, I think you said this, the McFarlanes were really involved more in shipbuilding before, isn't that right? Before.
No, my great grand, he was a contractor.
Contracting, yeah.
And he built the
Glenties line.
It was interesting you were saying the Burtonport line.
Yeah.
I noticed you were saying the quality of construction on the Burtonport line and the Carndona extension because he actually didn't build.
No, it was Pauling who built that. Yeah, that's
built it.
right. Yeah.
They were Scottish, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Interesting enough, I think a lot of the stone for the Owen Cara viaduct actually came from Aberdeen.
Yes, it did. It's Aberdeen granite. Yeah,
that's
right.
So we shipped the granite.
it was shipped. Yeah,
from
that's
Aberdeen.
right. That's right.
But my great grandfather, he would have done
The Glenties line.
He did the Glenties
Line,
line for the County Donegal.
Oh,
He did
yeah.
in fact, when he got involved in the Swilly, I think it was 1883 when they were looking for money to do the
Letterkenny,
the
yeah.
Letterkenny extension, and he was a contractor and he built a couple of other lines in around Ulster.
Yeah.
And so he got that's when he got involved in Swilly.
Right, right. Yeah, because one of the Swilly engines, JT Mackey, was used on the Glenties contract. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That'd be, and then again the Board of Works. So he was my great grandfather. He was always fighting with the Board of Works.
He was indeed.
I think he had quite good reason actually. I would say that now, looking from his perspective.
Yeah.
I would say that anyway. I remember he had a big campaign because they made him start building it from the Glenties side end of the line, which from a contractor's point of view made no sense because all your manpower and resources were obviously in Stradora. So that was one of his arguments anyway. But he had a few.
Yeah, I believe, yeah.
And this was when in 19. When did that happen?
The Glenties extension was
1890,
So this was
92, yeah.
pre-independence. This was the Board of Works.
Yeah.
That's
It's Board of Works in
in
London.
London.
Yeah, London.
Yeah,
Yeah,
before
that's
partition.
right. Yeah, before partition, yeah. Yeah. And that was the whole argument about closing Buttonport and Cairn. It was public money that built it. And there was a protest in 1940 at Crawley station gates by local people when they started to lift the track from Buttonport to Crawley. And the argument was the Lough Swilly weren't entitled to do that because the government had paid for it.
Yeah.
And the assets that the British had put in had therefore become, at that time, part of the Free State assets. But that was lost because basically it wasn't viable to run. I mean, as Anthony says, it went to all the wrong places. You know, it didn't go through the towns, and therefore, you know, it was a typical bureaucrat's way of looking at it. Like you almost drew the line and you got it there as quickly as possible.
Like partition.
Funny you should say that. Well, listen, we're having no politics here, but you're right.
That's what
Yeah.
they drew
They
the
were
Well-
well, and Trapp, and the train station was about a mile and a half out.
It was the same. That's right. Yeah. But
But that's what they did with partition.
Oh, they
just
did?
drew a line on a map.
Well-
They didn't look at where people were. Or...
the interesting thing is that there was supposed to be a boundary commission after partition,
They
which
were the
never
ones
sat.
that didn't do-
Yeah.
They didn't do their job.
That's right.
I
They
reckon if
didn't.
they'd done their job,
Yeah.
we wouldn't be the.
No, it'd be
a
quite
few years
different.
ago.
Quite different, yeah. And there's no doubt about it, the Lough Swilly company was devastated by it, you know, and that wasn't thought out, as was the CDR to some extent. Lost a lot of traffic from Derry down. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, the partition has left, if you like, the difference that we have today in Donegal and public transport.
Yeah, well,
It's still the
method-
legacy.
The method of the line on the map. I mean, it was the same
Yeah.
with India and Pakistan. You know.
Yeah,
that's
they
the
did it
same
there.
here.
Yes, absolutely.
Just draw a line.
And then
somewhere
walk
down,
away
so-
and leave the mess. Yeah, absolutely.
They did that in other countries as
Yeah,
well.
right.
They did that, and it happened in other countries.
Mm.
Yeah.
You think of Cyprus, and you think of
No, but I always wondered why the station in Falcarra was so far
So far away,
from the town. I
yeah.
mean, that's
Yeah, yeah. It's
amazing.
well, that's why when the Lough Swilly replaced the train with the bus ran through Falcarra, and people thought this was great and used it more, and rightly, you know, it was crazy. And the idea was, it was Balfour who was the Secretary of State who built these lines, and Balfour sent his wife to Carndonna to meet the parish priest and the Church of England rector to see if they were good enough people to build the railway to. And she came by, they gave her a great day and fed her and all the rest of it. And she came back and said, yeah, to her husband, give them a railway. And that's, I mean, it's exactly what you're talking about. You know, it's wheels within wheels, you know, crazy. Anybody else? Are we...
Anybody that was near the tracks, they were on the big stack, as I said. You know, if you had any incentive, look what it would have meant to the fisheries and guinea pigs.
Oh, yeah.
You know, of course, they were bringing in more fish. And there's no way to get them to market.
Yeah.
We salt them, cut
Yeah.
them and salt them.
Salt them, yeah.
And then eventually the big ice plants.
Mm.
But that was after the railway had closed.
Yeah, yeah.
Because while the railways ran, they could get them to Belfast and on further in the UK.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Donegal is at a great disadvantage without a railway, you know, and the All Ireland.
The three border counties.
Well, yeah.
None of them have
Aye,
a railway.
Donegal, yeah, Donegal,
Railway.
Cavan, and Monaghan. Yeah,
Not as much as
that's
rail.
right. Yeah,
But not only railways, motorways, gas pipelines.
everything.
You were talking about bus air and
Mm.
you know trying to get to
Yeah.
saying to get to expressway
Yeah.
to get to Carndonna. You can't. You know,
No,
there
that's right.
just isn't the infrastructure.
No, it's-
You still want to spend the money.
Yeah.
It's really sad actually.
But it is the result of partition, if you think about it, over the years. I mean, that's what's come down. But if the All Ireland Rail Review does deliver, Letterkenny could have a line again, or should have a line again. But you can't lay it over the Lough Swilly track bed because half of that's under the new road and other elsewhere. It'd be technically quite difficult, but it could be done. And you'd have to reopen the Derry. Well, you're all right. Your house is okay. There won't be a high-speed train coming through it. So don't you worry. You'd have to reopen the Derry Portadown line and split off to Letterkenny there, which was the original plan in 1863, I believe. But if you think about it, Donegal is unique in that no freight comes here except by road in the whole Republic. I mean, it's true in Northern Ireland. There's no rail freight in Northern Ireland. And if you look at the green agenda, it's astonishing, you know, that's where we are today. Whereas you look at lorry traffic into Killybegs, if all that was on rail, how different it would be. So I think Donegal needs to keep pushing to get railways back. Not a narrow gauge system like you had, but up to date, proper standard gauge, modern railway.
And
Because that was the modern railway of its day, remember?
about
Yeah.
30 years ago, I started a movement.
Mm.
I had a meeting over in the Abbey Hotel,
Mm.
and I had people from Derry,
Mm.
including Jim, who's now a board member, who's not here today, and the people from Western Track.
Yep.
They all came, busloads from either. And I got a chap in Dublin, and we drew up some plans. And they knew I was going Letterkenny through Ballyshannon
Mm.
onto Sligo,
Yep.
and then fast track from either Ballyshannon or somewhere straight into Dublin.
Dublin, yeah.
And people with a laptop and a phone
Mhm.
could set up their meetings,
Yep.
have it all organised, go to Dublin, have your meeting, come back that evening, same again.
Mm.
You could be working away on the train. You don't do it with just saying that we have a car.
Yep. Yep.
And, make us equal to the rest of the Republic.
The
gonna
investment,
say-
oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I this morning I was at another talk in the head of the Into the West campaign, who are the ones that saved the railway to Derry, because
Yeah.
initially it's going to be closed down. And Steve Bradley's his name, and Steve was saying that the full report for the All-Ireland strategy still hasn't been produced, but will be
That's
released, I think, in the next 2 months.
That's right.
And he feels that the initial and the big announcement up here will be actually Derry down to Dungannon,
Yeah, yeah.
including Strabane and Owen. Now, if we got to Strabane, that would be interesting, because you wonder if they'd literally hopped across the border, they were down to South Donegal.
Yeah.
And that strategy, they do talk about Derry to Letterkenny, but the date set is 2040, which is kind of on the long.
Might not be here.
Yeah, and the problem is that so many governments have these kind of long term which are never met, and that's,
Yeah, that's
I know when people heard that date, they kind of laughed, well, that's the never, never, So possibly Derry down to Oma or Strabane and Dungannon that way, but I don't know. We'll see anyway. But I know now's the time in some ways for investment in Donegal, because the Irish government is a bit flusher in money compared to maybe Stormont. So,
Oh, yeah.
so who knows? What will happen? I was going to say too. I actually was up at Cashagore last Tuesday.
All
I was
right.
up filming with the drone. And funny, the thing I couldn't get over about that station is it literally is in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't, and I kind of think to myself, where's the other?
Where's-
You're right in the country. You're near other
Yeah,
farmhouses.
that's
and
right.
funny, the road to get up nearly destroyed my car.
Yeah, that's right.
Get up, and then and I couldn't get over how I mean, it's beautiful, this
Oh,
location. And too, the link, of course, Donald Sutherland passed away. And of course, that's where he made the film with Julie Christie.
That's right. Railway station man,
The
yeah.
railway station,
Yeah.
which was interesting to me. But I just couldn't get over how remote that is. And it's a bit like Ryanair do with some of their flights to London. Luton or whatever. I think that's
Where you land to.
yeah, that's where we got it from. But Hugh, I want to thank you for today. It's great. I have to say, a good wee turnout. I know it's people probably at the beach today with their first bit of proper sunshine. But I have to thank you today for coming along and launching the book here. And I have to say, since we've had the launch, I was saying earlier, it's been a tremendous success. And hopefully that will continue. And again, it's adding to that larger archive. And there's people here who've been involved in also research and stuff and donating stuff, and it's great to see, because there's actually probably more of an interest now than there probably was a few years ago. And I suppose part of our job here as the County's Railway Museum is to kind of engage and get people excited about it. And the buses is very much part of that story too, anyway. And the Swilly. So Hugh, thank you again for coming today.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Wait, so give you that back. Sorry, I threw it away at the beginning. I couldn't get a damn thing to go out.
Okay, everybody, thanks for tuning in there. I'm going to bring the stream to an end now. Anybody who joined late, it'll go up as a video and you can watch it back later. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh, sure. Oh, yes, yes.